Guys, well, welcome to the Duck and the Goose Pastors Call. I think we have a good crew joining us today. A very, very important guest and a very, very important topic. We're going to be talking about young adult ministry. I wanted to just make a couple of announcements really quick before we jump into the call. If you are new to the Duck and the Goose, just a quick kind of background / story. The Duck and the Goose was really a collection of roommates, guys that knew each other when we were students at Southern Seminary, and we built deep friendships and have really been for one another a cohort to just, I would say, encourage one another and continued pastoral faithfulness. And it's just been a great
I'm just listening to this.
It's been a great group to be a part of.
For the Duck and the Goose thing.
If everybody just go ahead and mute yourself. Yeah. So anyway, it's been a great thing for us. We try to offer a couple of different tools for pastors, and really our hope, like you'd say, what's the hope of this? Like, Thomas Kinney just jumped on here. He's friends with Abe Hodges. Like, I'm kind of glad to be in his atmosphere and in his orbit. I think we want to really build friendships, relationships. And just great resources. And so Thomas Nelson, we're going to interview him today. Thomas is going to share his email address. I think is it just Thomas at ChristCovenant.com? Is that right?
That's it.
And then, mine's just Jason at ChristCovenant.com. Like we really want a network of pastors, friends in the ministry leaders that love each other, that can go to one another for resources, that can help one another find jobs. I'm looking for a youth pastor, those kinds of things. So it's just a small network. There's a lot of big networks in church life, but we want to just have a smaller and a very friendly network. We try to provide great resources like this call that we're doing right now. We have our webpage over here. We're actually in the process of kind of rebuilding the webpage. And we have a plan to put content like this on the webpage, little articles that we think are helpful. I'd love to, one day kind of have a job board on there. I'm looking for a youth minister. I'm looking for a music guy that people can utilize. And just whatever else we can think of that are real practical tools that the pastors / ministry leaders need to just, to be more faithful in their ministry. So this group of friends has been a great encouragement, and we want to really broaden the friendship with others. We do have two pastors calls coming up in the near future. And I just had texted Shannon. I don't know if she's on here, but Robert George and our friend Andrew Walker and Robert George. Andrew's going to be interviewing Chris. If you wouldn't mind maybe looking up the dates on those real quick. But if you have them, Shannon's looking for it. But Robert George and I sent them out, but I can't recall them right now. But Robert George and Andrew Walker. I don't know if any of you guys watched Trump's address last night. There's a lot going on kind of in the public sphere right now. We're going to talk about some of those things, even the Department of Government Efficiency. I don't know if Ben Bowden, who's a friend of the Duck and the Goose, was talking to somebody in his church who their son had lost his job. How do we handle those things pastorally? Robert George is just a really gifted guy. So that's on March 26th. So not too long, about 3 weeks from today. And we also have Carl Truman joining us. And that is going to be in May at some point. Maybe Chris will be on that one too. We also do an event at the SBC that we call the Duck and the Goose Late Hour. And so we're still working on all the details for that. We've got a really cool place that kind of overlooks downtown Dallas. We'll get you all information about that. So keep following your emails. A lot of resources coming from the Duck and the Goose. If any of you guys feel compelled to donate to help us do some of this stuff, we don't charge for any of these things. If your church would even consider putting $1,000 in your church budget, or if you guys even wanted to personally donate, we can kind of run this thing on a shoestring. We don't have a ton of resources. Christ Covenant is helping to provide for some of those, and we've had some other donors, but if you and your church want to be a part of this, we would certainly receive that. And you can do that right on the webpage. with all that said, Truman is May 8th. Carl Truman's May 8th. So these are going to be great conversations. Hope you guys kind of mark March 26th, May 8th. And then for those of you who are going to be the SBC, the Duck and the Goose late hour is on the Tuesday night of that meeting. Let me pray for us and we'll get to the conversation with Thomas. Father, we love you. So grateful for these friends and just how you're using them. It's amazing to think of today, this day, March 5th, 2025, how all over our country, faithful men and women are out serving you. We just want to create an environment where we would be encouraged by that and be encouraged by one another. And I just pray that Thomas, as he shares with us, the story of what you've done, young adult ministry at Christ Covenant, would be an encouragement to all of us. So, Lord, we love you. We just ask for your grace in this time, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thomas, just real quick, give us, and I want to be very quick here, but just give us who is Thomas Nelson? Give us a quick high level overview.
High level overview. Well, I'm not a young adult. I'm 48. But I've been an Atlanta native my whole life, Atlanta metro area. Just super local. I've worked at a few different churches in the area. The most recent church before Christ Covenant was Johnson Ferry Baptist. And that's how Jason and I got connected, got to know each other. I love the outdoors. That may sound like cliche. You hear that a lot of times like pastors, but I really do. I love using my hands, working on things, being outside, everything from hunting to fishing to fly fishing to climbing to, all the things outside. I think better when I can kind of be kinesthetic in the process, and it's like, oh, the ideas have started to come. So I work well under guys like Jason that are big visionary guys, big leaders. And so I've been very fortunate to work with some of those guys like Bryant over at Johnson Ferry. Married to Heather. We don't have kids. That's another part of our story, longer part of our story. Won't get into all that, but the short of that is we've really dedicated ourselves to working with the upcoming generation. That's really what we've decided to do with our spare time, is say, hey, since we don't have kids, let's invest in other people's kids. And we've really been doing that since we got married, for most all of our marriage. And we've been married, it'll be 24 years this August, which is pretty cool because that's we got married when we were 24. So we're hitting the split. We're hitting the split. We're as single as long as we've been married, and married as long as we were single. And so then we hit the 25 where we tipped the scales. And then I can officially say that I raised her. I'm just kidding. Yeah. Well, so pretty pumped about that.
So grateful. So grateful for you, man. And, grateful for your friendship. And so Thomas has done an amazing job leading this ministry. And it just started off as a little household thing. And now it's really cool. Atlanta's had the story of Atlanta young adults ministry. There was a large ministry for young professionals kind of in the 80s, led by a guy that went by Rat Riley. And then kind of in the maybe early 2000s, there was another large ministry led by Louis Giglio called 722. The difference in this one, though, is that it's church centric, which I think kind of makes it very special in terms of those things. So I'm curious, Thomas, just the story. How has this happened? How did this ministry take off like it really has?
Well, you're a big part of the story of how it happened. I was a college pastor at Johnson Ferry for 13 years, and this never happened in all 13 years until the last 2 years. In the last 2 years, people started calling me when they would graduate college and they would move back to Atlanta, and they would say, where should I go to church? For 11 years, it never happened. And then years 12 and 13, I started getting these calls, where should I go to church? And just to be full transparency, I said, well, don't go to Johnson Ferry. I love Johnson Ferry, but it's like a church for young married couples, or high school students or middle school students or kids. Go to this new church that Jason Dees is leading. And so that's kind of really the backstory of, on my side of things, where young adults got going. But you really led the first you were the first young adults pastor. You're the young adult pastor emeritus at Christ Covenant, Jason.
Well, it was a sweet time. It started in our house with like 6 young adults, and it just kept growing. But I mean, the way I would describe my era, and I really want to hear more about your era, but like we had a few catalytic young adults, which I think is important, and they would invite their friends, and we would just do a good job loving on them, getting them connected to one another, and teaching them the Bible that they were very genuinely curious to know. And so that was really our recipe. I led it until about 2020. And then kind of as we were coming out of the pandemic, Thomas and I had talked about this for a while before that, but we knew that it needed actual like focused leadership. But it's just really exploded, since Thomas took over. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm curious, like, what is the recipe? Like, how have you been? I mean, obviously Atlanta is a place where there's a lot of young adults that live, but how has it happened? How have you, what do you think is the keys to success?
Yeah, I don't know that it's like here's the recipe, you do this thing and this gets repeated everywhere, but I do think there's some transferable principles. Essentially what we have in Atlanta, and I'm not sure where everybody else is coming from, but we've got some really big churches in Atlanta that have kind of they've been on that cutting edge of this is how church ought to look if it's like cool. And so we also saw a kind of a fatigue with young adults that started coming out of that. They were like, I'm kind of tired of like, is it going to be better or bigger than last week? And we just said, you know what? Well, me personally, I'm not great at that anyway. So I was like, well, we'll just do 3 things. We'll have biblical worship, meaning you're going to have to like think about the songs. Like you're going to need to, and that fit the DNA of Christ Covenant. Like let's have songs that hit our head and our heart. So we're going to have biblical worship, and Will Carlisle's on here. You can wave your hand around. Will's our young adult worship pastor. He also leads on Sundays. Will's just an amazing guy, but Will's really good at writing those songs and leading those songs that hit your head and your heart. We decided we'd have biblical teaching. Hey, I'm going to primarily teach series through books of the Bible. I'm going to do one-offs and we're going to do topical things, but we're just going to teach the Bible and see what happens. And we're going to have biblical community, meaning we're going to have small groups. We're going to have a lot of small groups that spin out of this, because it's not just enough. I really don't think life change happens as much as we pastors like to think from the pulpit. I think a lot of life change happens in those small groups, in those one-on-one conversations. I think we preachers are like, we start a conversation, but people need another person to follow up on the conversation. That's so often what happens in the small group setting. So biblical worship, biblical teaching, biblical community. We have not changed that formula one bit from whether there were 80 people or 800 people. That has always been our formula. And I would say that that's been a really, really good thing to come back to. So from the very beginning, we said we're going to do 3 things. And if we have like off weeks or off seasons, we still go back to the 3 things. If we have really high seasons and amazing nights on Tuesday nights, we still lean back on the 3 things. Like we don't change the original recipe. We're just scaling it for growth at this point.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, like, I think one of the things that probably everybody in the call wants to know is, there are some distinctives of every generation. You hang out with young adults all the time. And one of the things that's cool about our young adult ministry, and you've now been a part of it, you'll be 5 years this year. You've seen graduations, yeah. And meaning like, all of my, like the young adults that were part of the ministry when I was there, I mean, there are a few of them still around, like Joel Ham, but he's probably about to graduate, but like, a lot of them have come, they've gotten married, then they'll like join a young married small group, they move to Smyrna or something. So there is a process. And I'm kind of actually curious, what are some distinctives of the young adults? And you've been in college ministry a long time. Like, how have you seen those things changing through the years also? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm part of like the grunge rock flannel generation, Pacific Northwest, just good times. That was when that was like people were a little tougher. Like I remember in high school, I told some of the young adults this last night. I remember there was this fight in our high school where these dads showed up to watch their kids fight each other in the parking lot. And I was like, it was just the 90s. It was like, yeah, it's just
different time. It's different time.
Yeah. But you think about like this generation, especially Gen Z, which is mainly who we have, right? You got Gen Z, like most of their parents are like, how did we survive? I remember my dad pulled up to the high school parking lot and watched me fight. Like, what were they thinking? We are not going to raise our kids that way. And then technology enables this real tightening of, okay, we're going to know where our kids are. We're going to know what's happening with our kids. So from a parenting standpoint, they're raised totally different than, I certainly was raised. But they're like, just some bullet points. They're like digital natives. Everybody is a digital native that I talk to. And, when I like would drive to see my friends in college, nobody knew where I was. I had like a paper map and stuff. It was awesome. But these folks have always been tracked. And so you get that idea, and that results in they're like very collaborative in their thinking. But it also means they have like pretty low critical thinking skills. And I know we have some millennials on here or some Gen Z on here, and that's not necessarily you. But overall, like if you've been fed information your whole life and your whole life's been pretty insulated, your ability to critically think is actually pretty low. There's a
I think that's actually a good point, because they come, and this may be true of a lot of Christians, but like I've noticed they like come to Thomas. Like we try to teach people at Christ Covenant how to think about things, but they just want to know what to think. Yes. And I think that's been a discipleship challenge.
Yeah, and every generation has its challenges, but that has certainly been one where I'm like, you can't find that answer. Like anybody could find the answer of the question you asked me. But there is also like that. It's positives and negatives. Every generation has positives and negatives. They really do have a high work-life balance, which can sound lazy, but a lot of them do work like really hard. They also just like want to enjoy their life as well. They're not all about their work. I'm interested to see what happens when they hit like the 40 family. If that shifts, I think they will be a little bit more about like work a lot. Because they do have some of those tendencies. You can kind of see it. People are pretty driven. I think I actually think this generation also has a high potential for loyalty, which is not true with like millennials don't always have a high potential for loyalty. But it's interesting because they want something to belong to. I think that there's real staying power with some of these folks. It doesn't mean they'll be in the same city their whole life, but I think it does mean that what they grab onto, they're going to hold on to.
But I also think that can be like I'm curious, this is kind of goes back to the critical thinking point too. It's kind of like when they come and ask what to think, it's not they can't find the answer. It's like, do we like John MacArthur or do we like John Mark Comer? Like, it's like, what should I like? Or am I allowed to like this? Or like you shared the story the other week about somebody that came and said, I like Chosen. Yeah. And I just thought that was like very indicative of like, and I think that kind of speaks to the loyalty thing. Like I want to be true to my tribe. And that's something that we at Christ Covenant, we say like, look, like we can learn from every tribe. Like we don't have to be hyper tribal here. And so, but have you noticed that's a distinctive of the generation?
Yeah, it's almost a permission asking for all the big things. But it is interesting because like that same guy that asked me, he came up to me, we had a ski trip and we took about 90 young adults to Copper, Colorado. It was amazing. And this guy who's like pretty high up in his company, he's in sales, does a really good job, has a house, has a boat, a truck, all the stuff, like just wants a wife to go along with the whole package. Like he can't wait to find her. Amazing guy. Very sheepishly came up to me and said, I like The Chosen. Is that okay? I watch it and I want to love God more. And it was like very, very quiet. He's like, I mean, he's taller than me. I'm 6'4". He's like very muscular. I'm like, oh, this is like talking to a little boy. this is very interesting. And so I think that is exactly what you're talking about, Jason. That's very indicative of this culture. It's like, do I have permission to do this thing? And if so, that means my tribe is giving me permission. So there must be a bunch of us out there, and I feel safe. And I do think there is something to feeling safe with this generation. I think there's a very low tolerance for risk. And that's not everybody, but there are a lot of people that it is like, they, even in relationships, like they have a very hard time asking someone out if there's a chance for risk. So you think back to like passing the note in second grade. Hey, would you give this to so-and-so to pass to so-and-so and see if they might like me? You see that with 30-year-olds. And it's just a very low tolerance for risk. And I do think some of that is like the over parenting, the insulated culture, the always tracking with folks. And so we are challenging people to risk often. A lot of sermons have some sort of application involving risk and faith, and not eliminating the step of faith in following Christ.
Really good stuff. Okay, I do want to get to your questions, and I see some coming in. We'll do about 10 more minutes, just kind of interviewing Thomas here, and then we'll open it up for questions. But what are some like things? I mean, you've been in ministry a long time, Thomas. And then you've been doing this for 5 years. Like, what are some things that you maybe didn't expect? Some things that have kind of caught you off guard? Some things that you've learned?
Yeah. I mean, I really didn't know, like, I left this like big machine of a church. It was a great church. Jason has this like, this like just vision, go get them mentality. And it was like very attractive. When I first said, come work with me, I said, what would I do? And he said, we'll figure it out. And so like, that was kind of the job description. My job description was on a napkin, and it had like a bunch of lines and circles everywhere. I saved it. I still don't know exactly what it meant, but like, I wanted to do that. But like with young adults, I came on and I was like, all right, let's do this young adult thing. And I don't know the exact numbers. Maybe there's 120, maybe there's 150. I don't remember exactly what the number was of young adults, but it was like, this is amazing. We met on Tuesday nights. We were a portable church, a lot of labor to set up, tear down, all that. But I didn't think that like every Tuesday I would just pray that they would please, Lord, come back. I just thought every week was like, the whole thing was going to fail. And I think that's kind of exciting time to be in a church though, where you're like so dependent on God, so hopeful that like it won't just fall apart. I still feel like that a lot of Tuesdays. I'm kind of amazed that people come. But I have been amazed at a few things. One, I've been amazed at our volunteers. I think that's probably the number one thing I'm usually amazed at, outside of like the hand of God himself showing up. But the way he shows up in these volunteers, we have so many volunteers. We have 138 volunteers. Kate's on the call. Kate's like amazing. She just sent me all these stats. We have 138 volunteers currently. That doesn't include our small group leaders. There's 69 small groups that have flowed out of young adults. That's 707 people in small groups right now. These volunteers go through 5 weeks of training. John, who's on this call, you can wave to everybody, John. There's John, but like, there's John. John trains all our volunteers. We got a lot of that from a lot of our volunteer training from the porch over at Watermark. We called them and said, how do you train your volunteers? And they do 10 weeks. We didn't know what we would do with people for 10 weeks, so we did 5. But I've been amazed at when you tell people you're giving them a ministry versus just asking them to do some stuff in a ministry. I've been amazed at their level of commitment and ownership. I mean, they view this like it is a full-time job. Like they love it. We've really been amazed. And it's not just because they're single, and they just have all this time on their hands. I actually think single people have like a lot of work to do. Like they have to do their own laundry. They have to do their own shopping. They have to like do it. Like there's not a lot of shared responsibilities there. No, they don't have kids and stuff. And I get that, but I've been amazed at these volunteers. I've been amazed at kind of the positive social media response. We've started to have people that'll show up and we're like, how'd you hear about young adults? How'd you hear about Christ Covenant? And they're like, oh, TikTok. And I am not a TikToker. But we have some folks that come in and they'll like video part of the service and they'll put it out there and it'll get like 40,000 views. We're like, what in the world is happening? Never saw that coming.
Yeah, our church doesn't even have a TikTok, but like people just come in and start TikToking.
Kate, do you remember how he described that? Didn't he
How who
describe it
described what?
how the TikTok guy described like young adults or Christ Covenant?
I don't. I mean, it was very like it honestly, I feel like I remember it had nothing to do with like Christ or Christianity. He was like,
Yeah.
it's a great place to meet people. And we're like, ah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
basically like a dry club that he was describing. He was like, "Yeah, y'all come on out. It's going to be great." But people did. Like we've been amazed at that. I think we've had to learn to like be a little bit like a sheriff where when you have a large young adult gathering, you're going to have some wolves that come in, and so we've learned to like spot those guys and what to do with those guys. We had a season where it was like every 2 weeks we'd have like the some dude with the worst reputation in Atlanta show up on a Tuesday night, and we'd have to like find him and nicely kind of run him out, or hopefully he would convert. But anyway, but I would say one of the other things that surprised me along the way is who comes to young adults, which then translates after about 3 or 4 weeks, they start coming to Christ Covenant on Sunday morning. So like it's a part of a whole. Initially, we had really strong Christians coming. And like the arguments that I would get into afterwards were if I taught like spot on theology or if I was like a little bit soft on something, and like we'd have these like cagey arguments. Now 5 years later or 4.5 years later, the conversations are so I think I'm a Christian. My girlfriend who's living with me, she's not. Like what would you say to us? So the everything's changed as far as like the ground level conversations, and we haven't changed a thing. But I think as a church and as a ministry grows, you do start getting folks that are coming because they heard about it from someone else, not because they're just immediately I'm got a deep walk with God and I want to continue that walk with God. So those are a few surprises, I think.
Yeah, that's super interesting, helpful. I'm kind of curious before we kind of open it up for questions. Thomas mentioned, Kate's on here, and then John and Will. I saw them somewhere. Do you guys have any? I mean, before we open up for questions, just like things that you're like, man, if you want to understand this ministry, this is essential to understand.
Yeah, I would say a big part of our DNA. I'm Will. I help coordinate the worship and just service planning and stuff. Um, but one of the things that I think is particular to our DNA is that Thomas mentioned like there's a lot of people who kind of have like what I might call like spectacle fatigue of, you know, they've been a part of church and churches that we love, but the mentality is just like, how can we like do this bigger and better all the time? And how can we always be on the cutting edge and everything? And I think to me personally, that seems like a tiring way to like lead a ministry. And it also, I think it's tiring. It can be tiring to be a part of that, especially if you're a volunteer. And so we have people coming in from that angle, but then we also have people coming in, like Thomas said, who are new to the church. And, they don't really know like the theological like words and language and might not necessarily be on the same common ground about like even understanding like what church is supposed to be and whatnot. And so we strive for this like with the worship, with the teaching, we strive for like great depth and theology and solidity there, but also in a very like approachable and uh easy to like connect with manner, because we're trying to kind of create common ground for somebody who might be reading Wayne Grudem's systematic theology uh, for the second time and somebody who might be reading the Bible for the first time, and trying to create common ground where both are listening to the voice of God speaking to them through the word, through the preaching, through the scripture. So I think that's something that me, Thomas, John, Kate, we've been in continual conversation about that. Like we don't want to water things down and we don't want to just wow people, but we also don't want to like leave people in the dust. So how do we create an approachable, accessible environment where we're like getting into the real stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I think with our volunteers, all of them want people to know Christ more. Like when they're going through the process, kind of one of the main things we try to like really emphasize is evangelism and discipleship. Like you are not just here for a Tuesday night, you're here to make disciples of Jesus. And they really want people to know the Lord. And so when people are coming in on a Tuesday, like whether they've been Christians for 10 years, they want them to know the Lord more, or if it's their first time ever coming to church. Like last night we had a guy he had been to church in 8 years. And it was his first time in church in 8 years. They want to minister to people in those circumstances and share the gospel and see them like read the Bible for the first time. And so I think that's a huge part of it. I also we do dinner before every single service. I think that's like an underrated thing, that just breaking bread together just breaks down walls between people. That's like a very practical thing that I think is so helpful for the ministry. And then I think even as the ministry has grown, we try to text every single new person who comes. And Thomas even makes like a touch point with every single new person who comes. And Thomas is always available in the lobby. Like there's no green room. There's no like, we're all with the people. And I think that's a really refreshing thing, especially in Atlanta. That's not always a common thing at churches around the city.
Yeah.
And so people are coming in, they're like, oh, I can actually talk to you and like get to know these things and get to know the pastor. And so I think that's been a refreshing point. But ultimately, like the heartbeat is just for people to know and love Christ more. And like, that's our desire. And that's the minute. And I think people see that and they have this longing for truth because it's so relative and culture. And they're like, oh, they're actually going through the Bible. And it's just this refreshing thing as they're coming in and hearing the truth for the first time. So,
and to tag on to that, like I have that same encouragement for my band. Like we don't go to a green room during the sermon. We just like go sit down next to like in the audience, and then or in the congregation, if you will. And then after the sermon, we just like walk back up and do the songs. And then I always encourage them like to go be available to mix and mingle. Like we don't want to just disappear after we do our thing, but we're the most easily identifiable group besides Thomas for new people. And so I think that's definitely a big part of it. Is there's not like the smoke and mirrors, there's not the mysteriously appearing and disappearing people. It's just kind of like normal feeling.
Yeah, super helpful. I want to open it up. Thanks guys for all that. And I've gotten some good comments. Even some of y'all are texting me, and I've got some good chatter on the chat here. I like Drew Jones's question, and let me speak to it just for a second, and then I'll open up to you guys. But thoughts on age graded versus intergenerational structure for young adults can both be done well. I would say that like the best young adult ministry that we do, and this is my opinion, and I'd love to hear from the actual team, but like the best young adult ministry we do is like having the like all the young adults in the same room at the same time is kind of cool because like they like being together. They want to meet people. They want to get to know one another. So, I think like the Vodi Bakum stuff is kind of dumb because it negates what the actual church is. The actual church is itself a family. And like there's a connection that you have with your siblings that are about your same age that you don't have with your parents, right? And so that is the way that like the church actually works. But you also need relationship with your parents. And so I say the best young adult ministry that we do is where you get the like, we're kind of all the same group in the big group, but then like David Dieter, who's, I don't know how old David is, but he's maybe in his 60s. He leads like a group of small men, a small group of men. We aren't a group of small men, a group of men. Now we're not able to, the problem with Christ's Covenant is we're not able to replicate that many times because we don't have enough 60-year-olds to disciple all of our 20-year-olds. And when I say we don't have enough 60-year-olds, like we don't even have like a 1-to-7 ratio. Like, and so we have to use like 28-year-olds to disciple like 23-year-olds. But anyway, that would be my answer is like, I think you have to do both. And that's actually what the church should be doing. Thomas, you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I have these kind of like these little bullets I'm looking at over here that so I think some essentials that are easy to overlook is if you want to have a young adult ministry, you got to have a senior pastor that's like passionate about young adults. And Jason started the young adult ministry in his backyard. So like we have a senior pastor that like loves young adults. And so if you want to start a young adult ministry in a church that the pastor is not like, doesn't really care about them, I would just say, that's going to be a really uphill battle. But then I think like maybe the deeply tied in with that is you got to have like a really good ecclesiology. We are not trying to start our own little kingdom on Tuesday night. And so I quote Jason and sermons. Like last night, Billy Bean was there. He brought in a guest speaker, Max Stiles, for our missions conference. We mention the church all the time. We mention baptism. If they're part of Passion City, we tell them go be a door holder at Passion City. Like be involved, be a member of your church. And so I think like we are constantly beating the drum of this is a part of a whole. This is not like the family of God. This is like a part of the family of God. And so yeah, I think that Tuesdays are really valuable for us, and the small groups that flow out of those are really valuable for us. I'm still chuckling because I'm picturing David Dieter leading a small group of men. I just can't get that out of my head. But like those small groups and all are super valuable, but they're missing something if they don't get involved in the overall body of Christ, which is multi-generational. So yeah.
I want to get back to these questions. You mentioned something though. We do have like people coming from other churches to this ministry, which just so you know, we think is great, but we want to encourage them to be good church members. We've even had some people come that are on staff at other church, which, when I was 26, I was single and I was the pastor of First Baptist Covington. Had this existed then, I would 100% go and would have loved it. And so anyway, I'm curious, like, just your thoughts on that. Like, cause I think, wherever your context is, like young adults, it's kind of cool because we have young adults from different churches that are connecting, but we're encouraging them to be better church members. You kind of mentioned this, but anything more on that?
Well, I think maybe just a side note on that what I'm grateful that I think we have like a generosity kind of mindset where it's, hey, we're not trying to just keep all the young adults all over Atlanta at Christ Covenant. We know that these folks can be valuable members of other churches, and they just don't have this type of fellowship of young adults. So we welcome those folks. We're glad they're there. We'll put them in small groups. Next Thursday night over at Jason and Paige's house, we're going to have a dinner for folks that are in ministry. And I hope we have 20 people that come to that dinner next Thursday night that are all serving in other churches in the area. And we see that as a stewardship and, potential place to poach new people. But, we gotta keep our options out there. But no, we do love that we have this stewardship of both like the other churches and our local church. And we're good with that. We're fine with that. We're not territorial.
Talk about like the tension between single versus married. I know the answer to this, but do we have married people come? Like, how does that work? How have those people integrated into the ministry?
Yeah, Kate, hit that real quick because you're married, and you weren't married the whole time. I know you're on staff; it's a little different, but like you've seen this with some of your friends.
Yeah. There is a strong tendency for people naturally when they get married to leave the young adult ministry because it's like, oh, I did that when I was single and now I'm doing other things as a married couple, which makes sense. Your life obviously changes once you get married. But we really love and encourage people in their 20s and 30s, whether they are married or single, to come. We have a married couple. They're in their 20s. They got married a little over a year ago. They lead a co-ed young adult group, our only co-ed young adult group. And they came to me and they were like, hey, we want to start this group. And we want it to be a mix of married, dating, single, just a mix of guys and girls, because we can all learn something from each other. As a married couple, we have a lot to learn from these single people in the group. The single people have a lot to learn from us. And yeah, so we have a handful of married couples and we're seeing more come, which I've noticed. And so I hope, and I think we try to make it clear, this is not just for singles. But again, naturally, when you get married, your things in your life change, your schedule changes, and you have someone else to consider. My husband, Kyle, he comes pretty regularly with me. And yeah, I mean, we love having married couples there and we encourage them, but obviously it is primarily composed of single people.
But a lot of the married people too have taken ownership of the ministry and like are showing leadership, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, Will's like our first young adult dad. I think Will just they've got a, how old is Leon?
He's 7 months.
Okay, 7 months. So really, it was kind of a big deal. Like you just see this growing up of the ministry, where it's like, oh, one of our main people, one of our staff guys, also has a child now. Oh, wow. Okay, so you kind of see like this like the family's growing a little bit. So we're typically like, hey, young adult in Atlanta means for a long time it meant 18 to 25, and that's because of passion and because of the conference that Louis leads, which is we think is wonderful. But that we kind of pushed the envelope on that and said we see young adults as like mid 20s to mid 30s. That's what we'll call young adults. And we didn't go with just single. We just said, hey, it's just young adults. So y'all come. So that's kind of how we've parsed it out.
there's a lot more we could talk about. I mean, that's an interesting conversation there about how like young adult has like aged up in our kind of current context. But
Yeah.
let's talk about dating. Obviously, like this is one of these like, you know, you have like tons of young adults that are all like coming together at one time. Like people break up, people date, people ask when they're out. Like you said, there's predatorial dating, you know. And so how have you managed that? You know, one of the guys that texted me said, you know, do you just encourage people to get married? And I would, you know, would say, yes, we encourage them to follow God's plan. But how have you done that? You did a series on marriage last year. I know that was very well received. So yeah, speak a little bit about the dating culture of that ministry.
Man, we could talk about this for like until like 3 o'clock.
It's like a whole new episode.
Yeah. But I won't talk about it till 3. I'll just hit it, look at some of the high points. I will say we have like some great success stories on here. You know, Kate started in the young adult ministry. She's married now. You know, John is well on the path. Nick Lascaris, who's up there, he's married and they're expecting. Like we got a lot of success stories of like they come in single and they leave married. But we also have an interesting thing where they won't date somebody in the same room with them. Instead, they'll go on an app and they'll like, well, I just don't want to date somebody that I might like break up with and then still have to like go to a worship service with. So we really try to emphasize like what is Christian community, what is the family of God, and in that you have an eternal perspective of, hey, every other Christian in this room will be your brother or sister for eternity. So we should date in that way. We should date knowing that like the long game is there's holiness and we need to treat people right. But we have folks that come in with such a variety of backgrounds. It's not a case by case, but it is kind of category by category. And colleges play into this, like some schools you go to and like it's fine for everybody to date each other. Other schools you go to, it's like you really don't date people within that campus ministry. And so they come in with their different little baggages. But I will say this, I still have this theory. If two people are well adjusted, even if they have baggage, they've dealt with the baggage, they're like in a healthy spot. What I have seen over and over again is within like just a few months, they kind of know this thing's probably going to go. And a few months later, there's like the proposal, and a few months later, there's like a marriage. It doesn't take that long. So it is always a little bit of a concerning sign for me when I see somebody who like dates for 4 years. I'm like, all right, what's going on with you guys? We used to have like very holy, like almost pious Christian relationships. Now, again, like I've had 2 conversations in the last 2 weeks about a guy who is dating a girl who's not a Christian and they're sleeping together, but he wants to share the gospel with her. And I'm like, okay, we've got some problems here. But those are newer conversations for us. 2 years ago, we weren't having those conversations with people. It was like all Christian on Christian, and everybody was trying like they had all kissed dating goodbye and all those things. But now it's like we're seeing a little bit more worldliness in our relationships. But that's that being said, we do still get some bad guys every once in a while, and that's what happens if you have a young adult ministry. It's just part of it, and we have a whole system for dealing with those guys. The one thing I'll say about those guys is we're never the first church they've come to. There's always a trail that they leave behind, and all it takes is 1 or 2 phone calls, and you find out they've done this at other churches, and so we're pretty quick to identify and deal with those guys.
Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. It's been super helpful. Thomas, I know you would love to, and John, Will, Kate, like if anybody on this call is like interested in what do I need to get started? I mean, just so you guys know, this ministry really just started with like a Tuesday night Bible study at my house. So, I mean, you can get started anywhere, and you just have to have somebody that wants to do it and has a heart for it. And so I know you'd love to make yourself available for that and offer any consulting. Is the best way for them just to email you, Thomas?
Yeah. I just put Kate's email on there. You can email me too. And
I would at least CC Kate if I were you.
yes. Oh, there we go. Kate, she did it. Okay, perfect.
Oh,
Kate.
wow.
See, she's good. So what we're starting to do on Tuesday nights, because like it's one thing to talk about this in theory, it's another thing to just like come and see it. And I would love to walk you through. So next Tuesday night is our very first preview we've ever done, where I think we've got 4 or 5 churches that are going to come, and we're developing a system to walk church leaders through a Tuesday night, through the small group model, and try to give you like some real practical handles of, I could do this, I could scale this, and it's doable. Our church could see something like this happen, because young adults are hungry. They're hungry for church. They're hungry for truth. They're hungry for a place they could trust. And so we will offer another one of those probably just before summer starts. And so we'll get that out through the Duck and the Goose and let you know. But we'd love to have you come, and we'll host you. We'll take care of you. We'll feed you dinner. We'll answer all your questions. Then we'll do a follow-up a couple of days later, a Zoom call, just to like, after you've had time to process. So really looking forward to trying to help some other churches, take this and run with it and see what the Lord might do in your local context.
Awesome. Well, Thomas, Kate, Will, John, thank you guys so much. So grateful for your ministry. Thanks for joining the Duck and the Goose. Don't forget about Robert George and Andrew Walker on March 26th. That's going to be a really, I think, important, interesting conversation. And then Carl Truman on, is that May 5th, Chris? I think so. And then, the webpage is duckandgoose.org. Again, there's not a lot going there. We're going to be, May 8th. Sorry. We're going to be launching kind of a more robust webpage in the next maybe month. And so kind of be on the lookout for that. We'll let you know via email. But so grateful for you guys and gals and the ministry that Lord's allowed you to do. We'll see you next time on the Duck and the Goose Pastors Call.